everyone, it's Jen again. I'm here with another weekly update. This week I was mainly working on Soul Labyrinth scripting. I have just little tiny scenes left, little dialogue variations in the final scene of the demo that I'm still trying to polish off, so hopefully that'll be getting released soon. I've also been working on redesigning, I don't know if I would say redesigning, on tweaking the designs, refining the designs for Soul Union. So when I was first designing the characters from Soul Union, I was taking a lot of the main elements from characters that I really designed back in 2000. And I didn't stray away from their original design too much. I'm still planning on probably keeping a lot of the same ideas, but I want to try to make them a little bit cleaner, a little more streamlined to make them easier to draw more consistently, and just try to kind of exaggerate certain features, just make them look a little bit more clean overall. This pose that I was drawing for Mikhail, I didn't have anything particular that I was unhappy with the underlying sketch, but I realized that having him kind of just standing there in that particular pose didn't feel super unique to his character. So I was trying to think of maybe changing up the pose to make it something that I couldn't really see other characters standing in the same way. So just trying to make him look a little bit more carefree and kind of give him this playful gesture with his hands. That's a little bit, I don't know, conceited or a little bit dismissive, playful kind of gesture. I decided to go ahead and cinch his kind of vest coat thing in the center of the waist instead of having it in that kind of higher placement. That was just a little bit more awkward, just to make his waist a little bit more obvious and give it a more traditional way of hanging the cloth so that it wouldn't be so kind of weird to draw from certain angles. And tried to minimize the amount of asymmetrical elements to his design so that if at any point I did need to flip the artwork, it wouldn't be as difficult to do that. Also tried to kind of tidy up his unruly hair just a smidge to make that a little bit easier to draw consistently, just simplifying some shapes. You can see here, for whatever reason, I was struggling with trying to figure out how the lacing on his tunic was working. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. I just kept thinking of lacing a shoe, and it just kind of kept forgetting which way I was going with it. So yeah, that was a thing. One of the things that I was thinking about this week, I did get a comment in my Twitter feed, which does, that never happens. Somebody was asking me if I was planning on having voices for my game, and it's not something that I've really ever seriously considered, just because my workflow being mainly a solo dev is kind of all over the place, and it always feels like the script, the dialogue is a constant work in progress. So my understanding to a more organized workflow that would involve voice acting would probably mean the script would be finished and polished and set in stone, and then you would get the voice talent to make the lines, and then maybe you would have final art assets based on all of that. At least that would be kind of what would happen in more of an animation production flow. And I just have such a long, like, drawn out process of like constant editing and tweaking and just doing whatever game asset that I feel like doing at that time, that I think it would be a lot to ask for like a voice talent to just kind of be available like whenever I happen to have script ready. So it always seemed like kind of like a pie in the sky kind of idea that I would love to have happen. But at the same time, like, I just didn't really see how it could happen. But since I am going back and remaking something that I generally have all the story for already, at least in a draft form, I think I could probably commit to some final dialogue as I am working through trying to refine all the other aspects of remaking the game, that I would like to at least try to have some voice for, at least like a proof of concept, like a demo of like maybe the first chapter. So I have been writing a little bit more of extended profiles of the characters, so that hopefully I can convey kind of like what they're really like, besides kind of what they say and do within the context of the game. That backstory kind of involves talking a little bit more about, kind of like, I guess, cultural context of like, at least like a character like Mikhail, like what his beliefs are and why he struggles with some of his beliefs, and hopefully helps give a little bit more insight to some of his motivations. Has to kind of do with like being raised in like the church and some of his like, I guess, feelings of questioning certain institutions without necessarily being able to like fully articulate like why he feels like the way he does, because he's often trying to avoid a lot of like his more complicated like feelings rather than like being able to fully understand them. You can see here that I've also been simplifying or streamlining my coloring process. I really only use like one brush for everything from inking to coloring. I just use like that round studio brush in Procreate, and I just like use it in different sizes. So I like to do that very rough kind of gesture-like sketch, so you can see in like that bluish green color, and that's just using a nice thick version of the round studio brush. And then I went ahead and I still used a fairly thick brush to kind of do like a very kind of a first pass for the inking. And then as I was trying to like kind of settle in on that line weight and refine those lines, I was just kind of like, forget it, I'll just re-ink it. And I'm keeping all the lines like pretty much uniform. The only time I switch up brush here is to use a little bit of an airbrush there to give him a little bit more of like a highlight to where like the light source is. And then I separate the line art there to kind of like lighten the line art around his like light hair and light eyelashes. The layer of blush there is also with an airbrush, and you can see in the final artwork I decided to flip it because I was thinking of like in the game I want to change the placement of like where the protagonist and the vassal are, so I wanted him to be facing more from the side, more towards the left side, as I'll have him placed more on the right side of the screen. And that's when having a more asymmetrical, trying to limit the asymmetrical elements of his costume will hopefully make making changes like that a little bit easier. You can see here that I have a description for him. He's 20 years old. Upon first impression, this young man seems easygoing, carefree, and humorous. I think of his inflection as being kind of very like outwardly just like kind of honest, like the type of person who pretty much wears his like heart and his like mood on his sleeve. He's pretty easy to read, and yeah, I think that he can probably get pretty like dynamic and excitable when he's talking. Has that kind of outward attitude of just being like very like, oh, nothing phases me, nothing bothers me, but you know that he's actually quite easily swayed. He was orphaned during the theocratic uprising of the church. So in the kind of very brief history, I guess, of the human civilization, they were ruled by like a very rich, like privileged class that had been working with the elves to learn some of the thread weaving, and then at some point when the elves decided that they humans might be posing a threat to their power, with knowing the whole weaving system, they sort of planted a seed with the church, and gave the church some assistance in being able to overthrow that human plutocracy, which kind of like upended. It was kind of like a populist movement, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, that populist movement, like many institutes of power, eventually kind of also became victim to a lot of that same kind of like internal corruption that can happen. And in some ways, like the old money still was able to exert a lot of control by way of through the church. So it wasn't so much that the whole ruling system got overturned into like a whole new ruling class, more so that it was just the same ruling class with like a different face. So anyways, yes, Mikhail was raised in the church in an orphanage, and he did not like being pitied by the rich patrons who had come by the church, and the church would take pity on the orphans and then make donations to the church, and he would be told to like show his gratitude, and he really didn't appreciate that. So then he started getting mischievous and taking out his revenge by like picking pockets of these rich patrons, and just kind of getting away with as much as he could to just get back at these people, and that kind of got him started on his little pathway of like petty crime. Yeah, that's a little bit of his backstory, and I think he makes a lot of character growth by the end of the game, but by no means is he fully healed or fully at terms with all of his issues. But hopefully, he's on the right path by the end of the story, at least in a better place than he was when he started. And I could see him really turning his life around in another 10 years or so.